Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I sat at our scratched wooden dining table in Denver, staring at the MIT acceptance letter in my trembling hands when I made the biggest mistake of my evening. I decided to share good news with my family. Dad barely glanced up from his phone as I announced my full scholarship to Massachusetts Institute of Technology. "That's nice, Wilson," he muttered, thumbs still flying across his screen. Then his face lit up like Christmas morning as he jumped from his chair. "Speaking of announcements, Jake just texted he's engaged to Sarah. We're throwing an engagement party next Saturday." Mom squealed with delight, rushing to hug my brother, who strutted into the kitchen, grinning. My heart sank into my stomach. Next Saturday was my graduation day. The silence that followed my quiet mention of the scheduling conflict felt heavier than the Colorado mountains surrounding our suburb. Mom's excitement deflated slightly as she processed my words, but Dad waved his hand dismissively. "Wilson, you can celebrate your graduation anytime. This is Jake's engagement we're talking about. Family comes first." Those 4 words hit me like a punch to the chest. Family comes first. Apparently, I wasn't family enough. I excused myself and walked upstairs to my bedroom, the same cramped space I'd occupied since childhood, while Jake enjoyed the master suite on the main floor. My walls were covered with academic achievement certificates, science fair ribbons, and scholarship announcements that nobody had ever bothered to frame properly. Jake's room downstairs showcased his high school football trophies and framed photos from parties. Sitting on my narrow bed, I pulled out my laptop and began scrolling through old family photos on social media. Every birthday, every holiday, every celebration revolved around Jake. When he scored his first touchdown in middle school, Dad took him to a Broncos game. When I won the state science Olympiad that same year, Dad was at Jake's practice. The pattern stretched back as far as I could remember. While Jake received a generous allowance for just being awesome, I worked weekends at the local grocery store bagging groceries and stocking shelves to save money for college application fees. When Jake wanted a car for his 16th birthday, Mom and Dad surprised him with a used Honda Civic. When I turned 16, they handed me a bus pass and told me it builds character. I remembered applying for dozens of scholarships, staying up until 3 in the morning writing essays and filling out applications. My guidance counselor, Mrs. Henderson, helped me navigate the process because my parents were always too busy with Jake's social calendar to learn about financial aid deadlines. The next morning, I overheard Mom on the phone with her sister, Aunt Carol. "Oh, Wilson got into some college in Massachusetts," she said casually, as if MIT was equivalent to community college. "But Jake's engagement is so exciting. Sarah comes from such a lovely family. Her father owns 3 car dealerships." I was pouring cereal when Mom hung up and turned to me with an afterthought expression. "Honey, you understand why we can't come to your graduation, right? Jake only gets engaged once." I wanted to point out that Jake had already been engaged twice before, but I held my tongue. Instead, I nodded and finished my breakfast in silence. That afternoon, Jake cornered me in the kitchen while I was making a sandwich for work. "Don't be such a drama queen about this whole graduation thing," he said, grabbing a soda from the refrigerator. "It's not like anyone really cares about those ceremonies anyway. You walk across a stage, shake some old guy's hand, and sit through boring speeches. My engagement party is actually going to be fun. This graduation represents 4 years of work, Jake. And it's MIT. He laughed and shook his head. "Dude, you're way too serious about everything. That's your problem. You need to learn how to live a little instead of burying your nose in books all the time." I stared at my brother, realizing we lived in completely different universes despite sharing the same house for 18 years. In his universe, achievements happened automatically, and celebrations were guaranteed. In mine, every accomplishment required sacrifice, and recognition was something I had to earn over and over again. Later that evening, I called Mrs. Henderson to thank her for writing my recommendation letters. During our conversation, she mentioned something that stopped me cold. "Well, why, Wilson, I hope you know how proud your family must be. When I called your mother last month to discuss your scholarship options, she seemed a bit distracted. I got the impression she was planning some sort of family celebration. My chest tightened. Mom hadn't been planning anything for me. She had been planning Jake's engagement party even before he was officially engaged. I hung up the phone and sat in the growing darkness of my room, processing the realization that my family had never intended to celebrate my graduation. The engagement party wasn't a conflict. It was a choice. They chose Jake just like they always had. That night, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my relationship with my family forever. I would attend my MIT graduation alone, and I would stop expecting them to prioritize my achievements. If I wanted recognition and support, I would have to find it elsewhere. The next morning, I bought my plane ticket to Boston and began preparing for the most important day of my academic career, knowing I would face it without the people who were supposed to love me most. The morning of my graduation dawned crisp and clear in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I stood in my tiny dorm room adjusting my cap and gown in the mirror, while my roommate Marcus got ready for his own ceremony. His parents had arrived the night before from Phoenix, along with his grandmother, 2 aunts, and his little sister. They had taken over the entire common area with balloons, flowers, and enough food to feed a small army. "You sure you don't want to sit with my family?" Marcus asked for the 3rd time, genuine concern in his voice. "My mom already considers you her honorary son after hearing about your study habits." I forced a smile and shook my head. "Thanks, but I'm good. I prefer the independence." Marcus knew the truth about my family situation, but he was kind enough not to push the subject. He had watched me spend every holiday break in our dorm room while other students went home. He had seen me work in the campus library instead of going home for Thanksgiving. After Marcus left with his enthusiastic family parade, I walked across campus alone. The May morning carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers and fresh possibilities. But my chest felt hollow. Families streamed toward the graduation venue, parents carrying cameras and grandparents moving slowly with walkers decorated in school colors. I found my designated seating area and took my place among hundreds of other graduates. Around me, excited conversations filled the air as students pointed out their relatives in the stands and waved at people holding congratulatory signs. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Hope your graduation goes well. Jake's party is wonderful. Sarah looks beautiful. Wish you could be here?" I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. The ceremony began with processional music and speeches from distinguished faculty members. I tried to focus on the words about achievement, perseverance, and bright futures, but my attention kept drifting to the filled stadium seats. Somewhere up there, hundreds of families beamed with pride at their graduating children. My section remained conspicuously empty. When they began calling names for our engineering degrees, I straightened my shoulders and prepared to walk across the stage alone. The announcer called my name Wilson James Patterson, Bachelor of Science, in Electrical Engineering, magna cum laude. I stepped forward, shook the dean's hand, accepted my diploma, and turned to wave at the crowd. That's when I saw her. Mrs. Henderson sat in the 3rd row, wearing a bright blue dress and holding a small bouquet of flowers. My high school guidance counselor had driven 15 hours from Denver to watch me graduate. She stood up and cheered louder than anyone else in the entire stadium. After the ceremony concluded, I pushed through the crowd to reach her, my vision blurry with unexpected tears. "Mrs. Henderson, what are you doing here?" She embraced me warmly, and I smelled her familiar perfume that reminded me of her office, where I had spent countless hours planning my future. "Wilson Patterson, did you really think I would miss this day? You are my greatest success story." When I started as a guidance counselor 30 years ago, I dreamed of helping students like you reach their full potential. I couldn't speak for several seconds. This woman, who had helped hundreds of students over her career, had chosen to spend her weekend driving across the country to celebrate my achievement. "I wrote 12 recommendation letters for you." She continued, her eyes bright with emotion. "I made phone calls to admissions officers. I stayed late countless evenings helping you with scholarship applications because I believed in your potential. Today proves that every minute was worth it. We walked together toward a nearby restaurant where she had made reservations for a graduation dinner. As we sat across from each other at a small table decorated with white tablecloths and fresh flowers, Mrs. Henderson pulled out a wrapped gift. "Open it," she said with a smile. Inside was a leather portfolio with my initials embossed in gold lettering. Tucked inside the portfolio was a handwritten letter. "Dear Wilson," I read aloud. "From the moment you walked into my office as a nervous sophomore, I knew you possessed something special. Your determination, your curiosity, and your resilience in the face of challenges inspired me to become a better educator. You have taught me that success isn't about where you come from or who supports you. Success comes from within, from the courage to pursue excellence even when nobody is watching. I have no doubt that you will change the world in ways that will make all of us proud. Thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey." I looked up at her through tears I no longer tried to hide. "Mrs. Henderson, I don't know what to say. Say you'll remember that family isn't always about blood relations. Family is about people who show up when it matters most. You have a bright future ahead of you, Wilson. Don't let anyone convince you that you're not worthy of love and support." We spent 3 hours at that restaurant talking about my plans for graduate school, my dreams of starting a technology company, and my complicated feelings about my biological family. Mrs. Henderson shared stories about other students she had mentored and the profound satisfaction she found in watching young people overcome obstacles. As the afternoon sun began to set, she walked me back to my dorm building. "Wilson, I want you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll build your own family, find people who appreciate your gifts, and celebrate your victories. Life is too short to spend it seeking approval from people who can't see your worth." I hugged her goodbye, knowing I would carry her words with me for the rest of my life. That evening, as I packed my belongings for the move to my summer internship in Boston, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely proud of my achievements without needing external validation. Mrs. Henderson had shown me what real love looked like. It wasn't conditional or competitive or distracted. It was intentional, supportive, and proud. I decided that night to stop expecting my biological family to become the people I needed them to be. Instead, I would focus my energy on finding and building relationships with people who could celebrate my successes and support my dreams. My phone buzzed with another text from home. This time it was Jake. "Party was epic. You missed out, bro. Sarah's dad might have some business opportunities for you if you're interested." I read the message and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing for inclusion, just peaceful indifference. I deleted the message and started planning my future. 3 months into my internship at TechVantage Corporation in Boston, I was working 18-hour days and loving every minute of it. The company specialized in developing software solutions for supply chain management, and they had assigned me to a team working on artificial intelligence applications for inventory optimization. My supervisor, Dr. Amanda Chen, was a brilliant engineer who had earned her PhD from Stanford at 24 and held 6 patents in machine learning algorithms. She had taken me under her wing after I submitted a proposal for improving their predictive analytics system using neural networks. "Wilson, this code you wrote for the warehouse efficiency model is remarkable," she said one Tuesday morning as we reviewed my latest project. "Your algorithm reduced processing time by 43% while increasing accuracy. How did you approach the optimization?" I explained my methodology, walking her through the decision trees and regression models I had developed. Amanda listened intently, asking technical questions that pushed me to think deeper about the applications. "I want to present your work to the executive team next week," she said. "This could revolutionize how we approach inventory management for our retail clients." The following Wednesday, I found myself in a glass conference room on the 32nd floor presenting my research to 6 senior vice presidents and the chief technology officer. My hands shook slightly as I clicked through my presentation slides, but my voice remained steady as I explained the mathematical foundations of my approach. "Impressive work, Wilson," said the CTO after I finished. "How quickly could we implement this system for our largest client?" "With proper resources and a dedicated team, I estimate 6 to 8 weeks for full deployment," I replied. The executives exchanged glances that I learned to recognize as the look of people calculating profit margins. "We'd like to offer you a full-time position upon graduation," the CTO continued. "Starting salary would be $95,000 plus performance bonuses and stock options." I managed to keep my expression professional, but inside, I was celebrating. At 22 years old, I had just received a job offer that would set me up for financial independence. That evening, I called home to share the news. Mom answered on the third ring, sounding distracted. "Oh, hi, Wilson. How's Boston?" "Mom, I got incredible news today. The company where I'm interning offered me a full-time position with a starting salary of $95,000. "That's nice, honey. Listen, I'm actually in the middle of helping Jake with his resume. He's interviewing for a management position at a marketing firm downtown. The salary would be $60,000 to start, but there's lots of room for growth." I paused, processing her response. I had just shared life-changing news and she had dismissed it in favor of Jake's job interview. "A management position sounds great for Jake," I managed to say. "Oh, it is. The company owner is a friend of your father's from golf. Jake really impressed them during his initial interview. They said he has natural leadership qualities and great people skills." We talked for a few more minutes about Jake's prospects before Mom ended the call to help him pick out an interview outfit. I sat in my tiny studio apartment staring out at the Boston skyline, trying to understand why I had expected a different response. My family had never celebrated my achievements before. Why would they start now? 2 weeks later, during a team lunch at a trendy restaurant near our office, my colleague David mentioned something that made my fork freeze halfway to my mouth. "Hey, Wilson, didn't you say your brother lives in Denver? I have a cousin who works in marketing there. Jake Patterson writes Small World." "Yeah, that's my brother. You know him." David nodded, taking a sip of his iced tea. "My cousin mentioned him a few months ago. Said he got fired from his last job for coming in late too many times. Something about attitude problems with his supervisors." My stomach dropped. Fired. When was this? I think it was back in February or March. My cousin felt bad for the guy because he seemed to expect special treatment based on family connections or something. I excused myself from lunch and walked outside to call Mom. She answered cheerfully, clearly in a good mood. "Wilson, how wonderful to hear from you twice in 1 month. Mom, I need to ask you about Jake. How's his job search going?" "Oh, it's going wonderfully. He just started that management position I told you about. He's doing so well that they're already talking about promoting him to senior manager." I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of family deception settling on my shoulders. "Mom, what happened to his previous job?" There was a long pause before she responded, and when she did, her voice had lost its cheerful tone. "Well, that company wasn't a good fit for Jake's personality. His supervisor was very demanding and didn't appreciate Jake's creative approach to problem solving." "Was he fired, Mom?" Another pause, longer this time. "Wilson, why are you asking these questions? Jake is doing fine. He's always been good at bouncing back from setbacks." "I'm asking because I care about my brother and I want to know the truth about what's happening with our family." Mom sighed deeply. Yes, Jake was let go from his previous position. But it wasn't his fault. The company had unrealistic expectations and Jake felt undervalued. Sometimes these things happen. After I hung up, I sat on a bench outside our office building and tried to piece together the timeline. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to excel at my internship, my family had been lying to me about Jake's employment status. While I was earning recognition for my technical innovations, they were covering up his pattern of job failures. I realized that my family's lack of interest in my achievements wasn't just indifference, it was intentional. My success highlighted Jake's struggles, and they found it easier to diminish my accomplishments than to address his problems. That afternoon, I made a decision that would define my relationship with my family going forward. I would stop sharing details about my life with people who couldn't handle the truth about their own. From that point on, my conversations with home became brief and surface level. When Mom asked about work, I said things were going fine. When Dad called to ask about my plans after graduation, I kept my answers vague and non-committal. Meanwhile, my professional life was accelerating at a pace that excited and challenged me daily. Amanda had become not just a mentor, but a close friend who understood my drive for excellence. We spent hours after work discussing emerging technologies, debating the ethical implications of artificial intelligence, and planning research projects that could push the boundaries of our field. "Wilson, I've been thinking about something," Amanda said one evening as we worked late on a client proposal. "What would you say to starting our own company after you graduate?" I looked up from my laptop screen, surprised by the suggestion. "You mean leave TechVantage?" "I mean take everything we've learned here and build something bigger. We could focus specifically on AI applications for logistics and supply chain optimization. I have some contacts who might be interested in providing startup funding." The idea sparked something electric in my imagination. Instead of being an employee implementing other people's visions, I could create my own company and build something revolutionary. "Tell me more about what you're thinking," I said, closing my laptop to give her my full attention. As Amanda outlined her vision for our potential startup, I felt the excitement that comes from recognizing a life-changing opportunity. This was my chance to build something meaningful with someone who genuinely believed in my abilities. For the first time since leaving home for college, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged, working with people who saw my potential and wanted to help me achieve it. My family's indifference to my success was no longer a source of pain. It was simply irrelevant to the life I was building. Amanda and I officially launched Logicore Analytics 6 months after my MIT graduation, working out of a cramped co-working space in Cambridge that smelled perpetually of coffee and ambition. Our first client was a mid-sized retail chain struggling with inventory management across 47 stores. Within 3 months, our AI-driven system had reduced their operational costs by 32% while improving customer satisfaction ratings. Word spread quickly through industry networks about 2 young engineers who could solve complex supply chain problems that established consulting firms couldn't touch. By our first anniversary, we had 12 employees and a client roster that included 3 Fortune 500 companies. I was 25 years old, working 16-hour days and absolutely thriving in ways I never could have imagined during my isolated childhood in Denver. Amanda and I had developed not just a successful business partnership, but a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared vision for innovation. Our office had expanded to occupy an entire floor of a converted warehouse in Boston's Innovation District. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor, and our conference room featured a wall-mounted monitor displaying real-time data from all our client implementations. "Wilson, we need to talk about the global tech acquisition offer," Amanda said one Tuesday morning as she entered my office carrying 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression. Global Tech Solutions had approached us 3 weeks earlier with an initial offer to acquire Logicore Analytics. Their executives were particularly interested in our proprietary algorithms and our track record for improving operational efficiency. "What are you thinking?" I asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. They increased their offer to $85 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. We had projected the company's value at around $30 million based on our revenue and growth trajectory. This offer represented nearly 3 times our optimistic estimates. $85 million. They want our algorithms, our client relationships, and both of us to stay on as senior vice presidents for at least 3 years. "Wilson, this could set us up for life." I walked to the window and stared out at Boston Harbor, watching cargo ships navigate the channels. while I processed the magnitude of this opportunity. At 28 years old, I could become wealthy enough to pursue any dream I wanted. What does your gut tell you? I asked Amanda. My gut says we've built something special here, and global tech recognizes its value. This acquisition would give us resources to scale our innovations faster than we could ever manage independently. We spent the next 4 hours analyzing the offer from every conceivable angle. The financial terms were generous, the integration plan respected our company culture, and the long-term growth potential was extraordinary. That evening, I called our lawyer to begin negotiations. 2 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon that would change my life forever, Amanda and I signed the acquisition paperwork in Global Tech's executive conference room. As I wrote my signature on the final document, I became worth approximately $42 million. Walking out of that building, I felt simultaneously exhilarated and surreal. 3 years earlier, I had graduated from college alone while my family celebrated my brother's engagement. Now I was wealthy beyond anything I had dreamed possible. My phone rang as Amanda and I celebrated with champagne at a restaurant overlooking the Charles River. The caller ID showed Jake's number, which surprised me since we hadn't spoken in over 8 months. "Wilson, thank God you answered. I need to talk to you about something urgent." Jake's voice sounded strained and desperate in a way I had never heard before. "What's wrong, Jake?" "Look, I'm going to be straight with you because I don't have any other options. I'm in serious trouble and I need help." I felt Amanda watching me with concern as my expression grew serious. "What kind of trouble?" "Financial trouble. Really bad financial trouble. Wilson, I owe some people a lot of money and they're not the kind of people who accept late payments." My chest tightened as I began to understand the implications of his call. "How much money are we talking about?" $230,000. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my brother's crisis settling over what should have been the happiest day of my professional life. "Jake, what happened? How do you owe that much money?" "It's complicated. I made some investments that didn't work out. Some gambling that got out of hand. Some business deals that went sideways. Wilson, I know we haven't been close, but you're my brother. I need you to help me." "What about Mom and Dad? Have you talked to them?" Jake laughed bitterly. "They cut me off last month. Dad found out about the gambling and told me I'm on my own. They mortgaged the house to cover my previous debts, and now they're tapped out." I sat in stunned silence processing this information. My parents, who had spent decades enabling Jake's failures, had finally reached their limit. And now he was turning to me, the brother they had ignored and dismissed for most of our lives. "Wilson, are you still there?" "I'm here." "I know I haven't been a good brother to you. I know our family hasn't treated you fairly. But I'm desperate. These people are threatening me, and I don't know what else to do." I thought about the acquisition money sitting in my bank account. $230,000 represented less than 1% of my new wealth. I could solve Jake's crisis with a single wire transfer. But I also thought about 28 years of being overlooked, dismissed, and treated as less important than my brother's every whim. I thought about my graduation day, about countless achievements that had been ignored, about a lifetime of working for recognition that never came. "Jake, I need to think about this. Can you give me some time?" "Wilson, I don't have time. These people want their money by Friday, or they're going to start collecting in other ways." "How did it get this bad? Help me understand what happened." Jake spent the next 20 minutes explaining a pattern of increasingly desperate financial decisions. He had started with sports betting, moved on to poker games, with stakes he couldn't afford, and eventually borrowed money from loan sharks to cover his losses. When that money was lost, he borrowed more to try to win back his original debt. "I kept thinking I could fix it with one big win," he said. "I kept thinking I was just one good bet away from getting back to even." As I listened to my brother's story, I realized this phone call represented more than a financial crisis. It was the culmination of 30 years of family dysfunction, of parents who had never taught Jake to face consequences, and of a young man who had never learned the value of hard work or personal responsibility. "Jake, I'll call you back tomorrow. I said finally. Wilson, please don't abandon me. I know I don't deserve your help, but I'm begging you. After I hung up Amanda and I sat in silence for several minutes. That sounded serious, she said gently. I told her about Jake's gambling debts, about my parents' financial exhaustion, and about my conflicted feelings regarding my brother's crisis. What are you thinking? Amanda asked. I'm thinking that my family only contacts me when they need something. I'm thinking that Jake has never faced real consequences for his choices. I'm thinking that giving him this money might actually make his problems worse in the long run. Amanda nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is let them experience the natural consequences of their decisions. That night, I lay awake thinking about family loyalty, personal responsibility, and the difference between helping someone and enabling them. By morning, I had made my decision. I would not give Jake the money he needed to cover his gambling debts. Instead, I would invest my wealth in building the life I wanted, surrounded by people who valued hard work and personal integrity. For the first time in my life, I was putting my own needs and values ahead of my family's expectations. It felt terrifying and liberating at the same time. 2 years after the Global Tech acquisition, I had settled into a life that felt surreal compared to my isolated childhood in Denver. Amanda and I had purchased adjoining condominiums in Boston's Back Bay neighborhood, complete with harbor views and a shared rooftop garden, where we hosted dinner parties for our growing circle of friends from the tech industry. My role as Senior Vice President of Innovation at Global Tech allowed me to pursue cutting-edge research while maintaining the autonomy to choose my projects. I had published 3 papers in peer-reviewed journals, spoken at conferences in 12 countries, and developed algorithms that were being used by companies worldwide to optimize their operations. More importantly, I had built the kind of life Mrs. Henderson had encouraged me to create. My chosen family included Amanda, who had become my closest friend and romantic partner, David, my former colleague, who had started his own consulting firm, and Dr. Martinez, my former professor, who had become a mentor and collaborator on research projects. On a Wednesday evening in November, as Amanda and I prepared dinner in my kitchen, while discussing plans for our upcoming vacation to New Zealand, my phone rang with a call from my parents' home number. I hadn't heard from anyone in my family since Jake's desperate plea for gambling money 2 years earlier. Wilson, this is your mother. Her voice sounded formal and strained, as if she were making a business call rather than talking to her son. Hi, Mom. How are you? We're fine. Your father and I were wondering if you might have some time to talk about a family matter. I glanced at Amanda, who raised her eyebrows in curiosity. My family's definition of family matters typically involved requests for money or assistance that they felt entitled to receive. What kind of family matter? Well, Jake has another business opportunity and he needs someone to co-sign a loan. We were hoping you might consider helping him out. I almost laughed at the audacity of the request. After 2 years of silence, my parents were calling to ask me to take financial responsibility for my brother's latest venture. Mom, what kind of business opportunity requires a co-signer? It's a food truck business. Jake has done extensive research, and he believes there's a strong market for gourmet sandwiches in the downtown area. The loan is for $75,000 to cover the truck equipment and initial operating expenses. I walked onto my balcony, needing fresh air to process this conversation. Below me, Boston Harbor sparkled with reflected city lights, while my parents asked me to co-sign a loan for a brother who owed $200,000 to loan sharks. Mom, what happened with Jake's gambling debts? That's all resolved now. Jake went through counseling and learned to manage his problems. He's been clean for 18 months. How were the debts resolved? There was a long pause before she answered. Your father and I refinanced the house again. We were able to consolidate everything and create a manageable payment plan. I closed my eyes, realizing my parents had sacrificed their retirement security to bail out Jake once again. And now you want me to co-sign another loan for him? Wilson, this is different. This is a legitimate business opportunity with a solid business plan. Jake has really turned his life around. I made a decision that would provide clarity about my family's true motivations. Mom, can you hold on for just a moment? I want Dad to be part of this conversation too. Oh, he's right here. Let me put you on speaker. Hi, Wilson. Dad's voice joined the call. Thanks for taking time to talk with us about this. Of course. Before we discuss the loan, I'm curious about something. I've been wondering how you've been explaining my career to people back home. Another pause, this one long enough to feel uncomfortable. What do you mean? Mom asked. I mean, when neighbors or friends ask about your sons, what do you tell them about my work? We tell them you're doing well in Boston, that you work for a technology company. Do you mention that I sold my company for $85 million? Do you tell them I'm a senior vice president at one of the largest tech firms in the country? The silence stretched so long that I wondered if the call had been disconnected. Wilson. Dad finally said, "We don't really discuss financial details with other people. That seems like private information. But you do discuss Jake's business ventures, right? You talk about his food truck plans and his entrepreneurial spirit." Well, yes, people are interested in local business developments. I realized I was documenting their responses not just for myself, but for the recording app I had quietly activated on my phone. Something about this conversation felt significant enough to preserve. Now, that's interesting. So when the Hendersons ask about your boys at church, you mention Jake's food truck but not my technology career? Wilson, why are you asking these questions? Mom's voice had taken on a defensive tone. Because I want to understand how my family talks about me when I'm not around. We're very proud of your success, Dad said quickly. We've always been proud of both our sons. Really? Because Mrs. Henderson told me something interesting when she called to congratulate me on my acquisition last year. I waited for them to respond, but they remained silent. She said she heard from several people in Denver that Jake had been instrumental in my career success, that he had provided connections and guidance that helped me get started in Boston. The silence that followed this statement lasted nearly 30 seconds. Wilson? Mom said carefully, people sometimes misunderstand things when stories get passed around. So you've never told anyone that Jake helped with my career? Not exactly. We might have mentioned that you boys have always supported each other. I felt my anger building as I realized the extent of their deception. Mom, Dad, let me be very clear about something. Jake has never provided connections, guidance, or support for my career. I got into MIT on my own merit. I built my company through my own work and Amanda's partnership. I achieved everything in my life despite the fact that my family ignored my accomplishments for 30 years. Wilson, you're being dramatic, Dad said. We've always supported you. You missed my MIT graduation to attend Jake's engagement party. That was a scheduling conflict. You've never visited me in Boston. We've been busy with family obligations. You've never celebrated any of my professional achievements. We celebrate differently than you do. I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city where I had built a successful life without any help from my family, and felt a clarity that was both painful and liberating. I'm not going to co-sign Jake's loan, I said calmly. I'm also not going to continue pretending that we have the kind of family relationship where these requests are appropriate. Wilson, you're being selfish, Mom said, her voice rising. Family is supposed to help family. You're right, Mom. Family is supposed to help family. But for 30 years, this family has only helped Jake. I'm done being the backup plan for when his latest scheme falls apart. You don't understand the pressure Jake has been under, Dad interjected. He's trying to rebuild his life and he needs support from people who love him. I love Jake, but I won't enable him anymore. And I won't allow you to continue taking credit for my achievements while asking me to subsidize his failures. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony for over an hour, processing the conversation and its implications. My family's pattern of behavior was so deeply ingrained that they couldn't even acknowledge it when confronted directly. Amanda found me there later, wrapped in a blanket and staring out at the harbor. How did it go? She asked gently. About as well as I expected. They want me to co-sign a loan for Jake's food truck business, and they've been telling people back home that Jake helped build my career. Amanda sat beside me, taking my hand in both of hers. I'm sorry, Wilson. That must be incredibly hurtful. Actually, I think I'm past being hurt by it. I'm angry, but I'm also relieved to finally have clarity about where I stand with them. What are you thinking about doing? I looked at Amanda, this remarkable woman who had believed in my potential from the day we met, who had partnered with me to build something extraordinary, who celebrated my victories and supported me through challenges. I'm thinking about hosting a family reunion, I said. It's time for some truth-telling. 3 months after my parents' loan request, I sent formal invitations to every member of my extended family for a reunion weekend at the Broadmoor Resort in Colorado Springs. The invitation was elegant and mysterious, mentioning only that I wanted to share some important family news and celebrate our connections. I reserved the resort's private conference room for Saturday afternoon, complete with catering, audiovisual equipment, and professional photography services. The cost was significant, but I had learned that investing in the right setting could make important conversations more impactful. 23 family members confirmed their attendance, including my parents, Jake, aunts, and uncles from both sides, and several cousins I hadn't seen since childhood. I flew in from Boston on Friday evening and spent Saturday morning preparing a presentation that would change our family dynamics forever. The conference room featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Cheyenne Mountain, plush seating arranged in a semicircle, and a large screen where I would display my carefully prepared materials. I had spent weeks organizing documents, photographs, and timelines that would tell the complete story of my journey from overlooked second son to successful entrepreneur. At 2 o'clock, my relatives filed into the conference room with expressions ranging from curiosity to mild concern. Mom and Dad sat in the front row looking uncomfortable but trying to maintain pleasant expressions. Jake arrived 15 minutes late, slightly disheveled and smelling of alcohol despite the early afternoon hour. Thank you all for coming. I began standing at the front of the room with a confidence that had taken me 30 years to develop. I wanted to bring our family together because there are some things I need to share with all of you. I clicked to my first slide, which displayed a simple title, The Truth About Wilson's Journey. For most of my life, I believed that success meant earning recognition from the people I loved most. I worked harder than anyone I knew, achieved things that should have made my family proud, and waited for the day when my parents would celebrate my accomplishments the way they celebrated Jake's. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Aunt Carol glanced nervously at my parents, while Uncle Tom leaned forward with interest. Today, I want to share the real story of my path to success, and I want to address some misconceptions that have been circulating within our family. My second slide showed a timeline spanning from high school through my recent acquisition. Each achievement was documented with dates, details, and supporting evidence. While Jake was receiving allowances and having his college expenses paid, I worked part-time jobs to save money for application fees. While Jake was given a car for his 16th birthday, I took public transportation and walked to work. While Jake was attending parties and social events, I was studying for scholarships and academic competitions. I could see Mom's face reddening as I continued, but I pressed forward with calm determination. When I was accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, my family's response was to schedule Jake's engagement party on my graduation day. I attended my graduation alone, except for my high school guidance counselor, who drove 15 hours to be there. Aunt Patricia gasped audibly, while my cousin Sarah shook her head in disbelief. After graduation, I built a technology company with my business partner Amanda. We developed artificial intelligence algorithms that revolutionized supply chain management. Last year, we sold our company to Global Tech Solutions for $85 million. The room fell completely silent. Several relatives stared at me with expressions of shock, while others looked questioningly at my parents. I'm sharing these details not to boast, but to correct some misinformation that has been spreading within our family. Apparently, some of you have heard that Jake played a significant role in my career success, that he provided connections, guidance, or support that helped me achieve these results. Uncle Tom cleared his throat. Wilson, your parents have mentioned that you boys have always helped each other out. Let me be very specific about Jake's role in my career. I continued advancing to a slide that showed a detailed timeline of our interactions. Jake and I have spoken approximately 12 times in the past 5 years. 10 of those conversations involved him asking me for money or favors. 0 of those conversations involved him providing career guidance, business connections, or professional support. Jake stood up suddenly, swaying slightly as he moved. This is ridiculous. He said, his words slightly slurred. Wilson, you're making us all look bad just because you're successful now. We've always been proud of you. Jake, please sit down, Mom said urgently. No, this is crazy. Wilson acts like he's better than all of us just because he makes good money. He abandoned his family when we needed him most. When I was going through the worst time of my life, he turned his back on me. The room's attention shifted to Jake as he continued his emotional outburst. My own brother wouldn't help me when I was in trouble. I could have lost everything and he didn't care. What kind of person does that to family? Uncle Frank, who had remained quiet until this point, stood up and faced Jake directly. Jake, son, I think you need to sit down and listen to what your brother is saying. Uncle Frank, you don't understand what really happened. Actually, I think I understand perfectly. Your brother worked his tail off to build something impressive, and instead of being proud of him, you're standing here drunk at 2 p.m. making demands. Aunt Patricia joined the confrontation. Jake, honey, we've all been wondering about some of the stories we've heard. Your parents told us you were helping Wilson with business advice. But that never made sense to those of us who know you both. My cousin David nodded in agreement. Jake, I'm sorry, but everyone in this family knows that Wilson has always been the responsible one. We've all seen him work harder than anyone else while you coasted on charm and family connections. Jake's face flushed with anger and embarrassment as he realized the room was not supporting his version of events. This whole family has always favored Wilson, he said defensively. He was always the perfect son, and I could never compete with his grades and achievements. Jake, I said calmly, that's not true, and everyone in this room knows it. You were the favored son from the day we were born. The difference is that I learned to succeed without family support while you learned to expect it. Mom finally spoke up, her voice trembling with emotion. Wilson, you're hurting your brother by saying these things in front of everyone. Mom, I'm telling the truth in front of everyone. There's a difference. We've always loved you both equally, Dad added weakly. Uncle Tom laughed bitterly. Robert, that's not true, and you know it. Every family gathering for the past 20 years has revolved around Jake's latest drama, while Wilson's achievements get mentioned in passing. Tom, you don't understand the complexity of our family situation? Mom protested. I understand enough, he replied. I understand that Wilson graduated from one of the best engineering schools in the country, built a multi-million-dollar company, and none of you bothered to attend his graduation or visit him in Boston. The room erupted in overlapping conversations as relatives began sharing their own observations about our family dynamics. Some defended my parents, while others expressed long-held concerns about the unequal treatment Jake and I had received. Through the chaos, I noticed something remarkable happening. Jake had stopped protesting and was sitting quietly, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in our adult lives, he looked genuinely remorseful. Wilson, he said, when the room finally quieted down, I think I need help. Real help. Not money, not loans, not bailouts. I think I need to figure out how to be a better person. I walked over to my brother and sat in the chair beside him. Jake, I've been waiting 30 years to hear you say that. I've been jealous of you our entire lives, he continued. You made everything look easy, while I struggled with things that should have been simple. Instead of working harder, I learned to manipulate situations to get what I wanted. What are you thinking about doing differently? I want to go to rehab. Real rehab, not just for gambling, but for all of it. I want to learn how to be responsible for my own life instead of expecting everyone else to fix my problems. I looked around the room at our family members, many of whom were openly crying as they witnessed this breakthrough. Jake, if you're serious about getting help, I'll support you through that process. But I won't enable your old patterns anymore. I understand. And Wilson, I owe you an apology that's about 20 years overdue. Mom and Dad approached us tentatively, looking uncertain about their role in this new dynamic. Wilson, we owe you an apology too, Mom said quietly. We failed you as parents, and we failed Jake too by not teaching him accountability. Dad nodded, his voice barely audible. We got so focused on managing Jake's crises that we forgot to celebrate your successes. That was wrong, and we're sorry. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was having an honest conversation with my family. 2 years after our family reunion at the Broadmoor Resort, I stood in the nursery of my Boston home, assembling a crib, while Amanda sorted through baby clothes that had been gifts from friends and colleagues around the world. Our daughter would be born in 6 weeks, and we had spent months preparing not just our home, but our hearts for the privilege of becoming parents. The past 24 months had brought changes I never could have imagined during my lonely childhood in Denver. Jake had completed an intensive rehabilitation program in California, followed by 18 months of outpatient therapy and support group meetings. He now worked as a substance abuse counselor at a treatment center in Colorado Springs, helping other people navigate the challenges of addiction and financial recovery. Our conversations had evolved from awkward apologies to genuine friendship built on mutual respect and honesty. Jake called every few weeks to share updates about his work, his progress in therapy, and his growing understanding of the damage his previous behavior had caused to our family relationships. Wilson, I never realized how much pressure I put on everyone by refusing to take responsibility for my choices, he had told me during our most recent conversation. Watching you build your life without asking anyone for help has taught me what real strength looks like. Mom and Dad had also made significant changes attending family counseling sessions to understand their patterns of favoritism and learn healthier ways of relating to both their sons. They had visited Amanda and me in Boston 3 times, marveling at our home, our work, and the life we had built together. During their most recent visit, Dad had spent an entire afternoon asking detailed questions about my research projects and business strategies. For the first time in my memory, he seemed genuinely interested in understanding my work, rather than simply acknowledging it politely before changing the subject. Wilson, I'm embarrassed that it took me 63 years to recognize how remarkable you are, he had said as we walked along the Charles River. I spent so much energy trying to fix Jake's problems that I forgot to appreciate the son who never needed fixing. Global Tech had promoted me to Chief Innovation Officer, making me the youngest executive in the company's history. My team now included 47 engineers and data scientists working on projects that would shape the future of artificial intelligence applications in business operations. Amanda and I had also expanded our philanthropic activities, establishing a scholarship program for first-generation college students pursuing engineering degrees. We had already funded full scholarships for 12 students, including several young people who reminded me of my younger self, brilliant, determined, and lacking family support for their educational aspirations. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 70s and retired from guidance counseling, served on our scholarship selection committee. She had become an honorary grandmother to Amanda and me, joining us for holidays and family celebrations, with the enthusiasm of someone who understood the importance of chosen family. Wilson, watching you create the life you deserved has been one of my greatest joys. She had told me at our wedding 2 years earlier. You've proven that love and support can be found in the most unexpected places. On this particular Saturday morning in October, as Amanda and I prepared for our daughter's arrival, my phone rang with a call that would complete the transformation of our family relationships. Wilson, this is Jake. Are you busy? Just setting up the nursery. What's going on? I wanted to call because I have some news to share. and I wanted you to be the first person to hear it. I paused in my crib assembly, giving Jake my full attention. Sarah and I are engaged. Sarah was the woman Jake had been dating for 8 months, a fellow counselor at the treatment center who understood his history and supported his ongoing recovery. Jake, that's wonderful news. Tell me about her. She's nothing like anyone I've ever dated before. She's kind, intelligent, and completely unimpressed by charm or manipulation. She calls me out when I'm making excuses, and she celebrates my genuine achievements. She sounds perfect for you. Wilson, I want to ask you something important. Would you consider being my best man? I sat down on the floor of the nursery, overwhelmed by the significance of this request. Jake, I would be honored. There's more. Sarah and I want to have the wedding reception at your house in Boston, if you and Amanda would be willing to host it. We want our celebration to happen in a place that represents success built on hard work and authentic relationships. I looked around our home with its harbor views and walls covered with photos of the family we had chosen and built together, and felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought us to this moment. Of course we'll host your reception. Amanda will be thrilled to help plan everything. After we finished talking, I called Mom and Dad to share Jake's engagement news. Their excitement was genuine but measured, reflecting their new understanding that sustainable happiness comes from personal growth rather than external circumstances. We're proud of both our sons, Mom said, and for the first time in my life, I believed she meant it equally. 3 months later, on a snowy Saturday in January, our entire family had gathered in our Boston home for Jake and Sarah's wedding reception. The living room had been transformed into an elegant celebration space, with flowers from our favorite local florist, and catering from the restaurant where Amanda and I had celebrated our engagement. Jake looked healthier and happier than I had ever seen him, wearing a simple black suit and a smile that reflected genuine contentment rather than manufactured charm. Sarah was radiant in a vintage dress that she had found at a consignment shop, embodying the kind of authentic beauty that comes from inner peace and self-acceptance. As the evening progressed, I found myself standing near the windows overlooking Boston Harbor, holding my 3-month-old daughter Emma, while watching our family celebrate in ways that felt healthy and sustainable. Uncle Tom approached me with a glass of champagne, shaking his head with amazement. Wilson, I have to tell you something. 5 years ago, I never would have believed this family could change this much. What do you think made the difference? I think you made the difference by refusing to accept dysfunction as normal. You forced all of us to look at ourselves honestly. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, Jake approached me as I was cleaning up glasses and plates. Wilson, I need to say something to you. What's that? Thank you for not giving up on me even when I had given up on myself. I stopped what I was doing and faced my brother directly. Jake, we're family. Real family supports each other through growth, not just through crises. I understand that now, and I want you to know that I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve the second chance you've given me. As I looked around our home filled with people who had learned to love authentically and support each other's genuine success, I realized that Mrs. Henderson had been right all those years ago. Family isn't about blood relations. It's about people who consistently show up and celebrate each other's victories. My journey from overlooked second son to respected business leader had taught me that self-worth doesn't come from external validation. It comes from aligning your actions with your values and building relationships with people who see your authentic self. Emma stirred in my arms, opening her eyes to look up at me, with the trusting gaze of a child who has never known anything but unconditional love and support. As I held her close, I made a silent promise that she would grow up in a family where achievements are celebrated, mistakes are learning opportunities, and every person's worth is recognized and valued. The snow continued falling outside our windows, blanketing Boston in pristine white that reflected the city lights like scattered diamonds. Inside our warm home, surrounded by family members who had learned to love each other honestly, I felt the deep satisfaction that comes from building a life aligned with your highest values. My parents sat on our couch admiring their granddaughter and marveling at the home Amanda and I had created together. Jake and Sarah were making plans for their honeymoon and discussing their dreams for starting a family. Mrs. Henderson was sharing stories about her former students with Amanda's parents who had become close friends over the past year. This was the family I had always wanted, people who celebrated each other's successes, supported each other through challenges, and committed to growing together, rather than staying stuck in destructive patterns. As I stood holding my daughter and watching the people I love most enjoy each other's company, I understood that true success isn't measured in dollars or achievements alone. True success is measured in the quality of relationships you build and the positive impact you have on the people around you. I'd spent 30 years, waiting for my original family to recognize my worth. Instead, I had learned to recognize it myself and attract people who could see it clearly from the beginning. The greatest victory wasn't financial wealth or professional recognition. The greatest victory was learning that I deserved love, support, and celebration, and having the courage to build a life that reflected that understanding. Standing in my home surrounded by chosen family and biological family members who had learned to love authentically, holding my daughter who would never doubt her worth or fight for recognition, I felt the profound peace that comes from living a life aligned with your deepest values. This was justice, not revenge against people who had failed me, but the creation of something better than anything I could have imagined when I walked across that MIT graduation stage alone. This was healing, not the erasure of past pain, but the transformation of that pain into wisdom, strength, and the capacity to love more deeply. This was home, not a place, but a collection of relationships built on mutual respect, genuine support, and the shared commitment to help each other become the best versions of ourselves. Have you ever had to choose between seeking approval from people who don't see your worth and building relationships with those who celebrate your authentic self? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content about personal growth and family relationships, and share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that you deserve to be surrounded by people who recognize and celebrate your true value. Until next time, keep building the life you deserve.